reading today from the Gospel of Luke, the 24th chapter, beginning with the 13th verse. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they responded. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of the women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said. But him they did not see." He said to them, "How foolish and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. I love this story. I love this account. Because we can take this account and we can put ourselves in it. And I don't mean putting ourselves back in Judea in the 1st century. We can take this account and lay it down over our lives today. Think about where we were a year ago today. A year ago Easter. We weren't sitting here. We hadn't just had a wonderful breakfast. The children hadn't searched for eggs. We hadn't been able to meet and celebrate. That first Easter did not start with celebration. It started with fear. It started with sadness and confusion. And even as the news began to get out slowly, it was still confusion. one of the two disciples in this story, he's not one of the apostles, but his name is Cleopas. Now, he appears here in Luke's gospel, and his name, or sort of his name, appears in John's gospel, where John says that one of the women who went to the tomb was Mary, the wife of Clopas. Now we say, well, Cleopas and Clopas, they're two different names. And yes, they are, except ancient Hebrew didn't have vowels. And so if you take out the vowels from Cleopas and the vowels from Clopas, you get the same name. So it is likely that the second disciple of the two on the road to Emmaus is Mary, the wife of Cleopas or Clopas. So they were a couple who had followed Jesus and had believed in Jesus enough for Mary to go with some of the other women to anoint Jesus' body and be one of the first witnesses to the resurrection. And yet still they don't understand what's going on. Their thought is, let's go home. We followed Jesus. We hoped that he would be the one who would redeem Israel. Something strange is going on, but let's just go home. And as they're walking, Jesus starts walking beside them, but they don't recognize him. How much of that is our life? How many times has Jesus walked beside us and we not realize it was him? How many times have we stood face to face with Christ and not realized it was him? I talk about living our lives so that people can see Christ in us. But there's two sides to Christ in us. The other side is there's Christ in others as well. One of my favorite people is the author Tony Campolo. And I've heard him speak, and he grew up Southern Baptist, and for years he led missionary groups to different places around the world. And he talked about this one time that he had taken this group of young people to Jamaica. And they'd had a wonderful experience working on building a school. And he said, and as they're getting ready to leave this small airport, they're in the airport, and this woman comes up to him and takes her baby and goes, "Here, take my baby to America with you." And of course, he doesn't know what to do with this. He can't. He doesn't really want to. He knows why she wants this baby to go to America and have a better life. And he turns away. And it's a small airport, so they have to walk out to the plane and walk out and climb the stairs. And as he's climbing the stairs, he hears this commotion. And this woman has rushed up to the guards, holding her baby out, trying to get somebody to take her baby. And they get on the plane, and the plane starts taxiing, and she starts running down the runway behind the plane. And as the door was closed, and there was nothing I could do, I realized that that child was Jesus, who said, whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. Now again, he would be the first to admit there was really nothing he could have done in that situation. He couldn't have legally taken that baby from its mother's arms and carried it onto the plane and come to America. He'd been charged with kidnapping even though she wanted him to do it. But seeing Christ among the least of these, for us it might be seeing Christ on the side of the freeway exit, holding the sign that says we'll work for food. Do we recognize when Christ is with us? What we do to the least of these, we do to him. Mother Teresa always tried to teach her nuns to see Christ in the lives of those they were called to help. And we try to make it so that we help those who deserve our help, as if we deserved Christ's love. We make judgments between those who are needy. Well, yeah, this person's needy, but it wasn't their fault, so I'll help them. But maybe you made a few mistakes on the way, and that's why you're in need, and you need to learn your lesson from this. So I'm not going to help you out. Jesus never said, feed the hungry unless. Care for the sick unless. Do we recognize Christ with us? Do we recognize his call? They get to where they're going. And Jesus has been explaining Scripture to them. And the way Luke puts it is interesting. He said, Jesus acted like he was going to go on. Which means Jesus didn't intend to go on, but he was acting like it. And he was waiting for them to invite him in, which they do. They sit down at the table. It's probably their home. It doesn't say it was an inn, so it's probably their home. And he takes the bread, and he breaks it and gives thanks, and immediately they recognize this is Jesus. Now my hope is that as we do that today, just like these two people back then, we will recognize that Christ is with us. We celebrate communion today. And what does communion mean? It means to come together. To commune together. We can see root words in there. And one of them we can see is union. And it is a union with Christ that we celebrate through communion. And it is very telling that they didn't recognize Jesus along the way. They didn't recognize Jesus through doctrine as he's explaining the scriptures to them, but they recognized Jesus' presence in the simple act of breaking bread together. Now, I know this is not exactly the same. Our bread is already broken for us. But as we enter into communion today, open your hearts, open your minds to Christ's presence with us. This is why we celebrate communion, to remind us that Christ is with us. So if the deacons will come forward, we will have communion at this time.